Tucked away in a small corner of the University of Washington campus, a group of young adults stand apart from the hustle and bustle of students rushing from one class to another. Unlike the students, our group glows in their high-visibility vests and rubber gloves. Tools in hand, our group begins to work on a patch of land now known as the Fountainview Site. This plot of land was taken under the Society for Ecological Restoration UW stewardship in fall 2018 as a part of the SARE UW's mission to perform ecological restoration on UW campus. This site features several large trees, including a Dawn redwood, a western white pine, a Port Orford cedar, and 3 Douglas fir trees. The Fountainview Site is a hub for activity, including students passing by on their way to class, and tourists visiting Drumheller Fountain in the nearby Rainier Visa. Despite the activity surrounding the site, there has been a low turnout of volunteers who invested in maintaining and working on this site. Additionally, under the canopy of the large native trees, this site also features a carpet of invasive English ivy. In order to improve the ecological structure, function, and biodiversity of this site, it would take many hours of restoration to remove the ivy, fix the soil, and plant native vegetation. This amount of work is a job for many hands. With the low volunteer turnout, it was uncertain if this site would be considered a success. My name is Victoria Fox, and I am the president of the SARE UW student organization for the 2018-2019 school year. And as a part of my final project for my critical and imaginative restoration ecologies course, I created an artistic intervention to inspire ecological consciousness and encourage people to engage in restoration activities. So, how could I use art to inspire people to volunteer? This question was central to my exploration of ecological-centric art. One thing that I discovered in my search through literature is that people want to know that their efforts are valued. They want to feel like they can make a difference and that their volunteering is appreciated. So I knew that my work had to emphasize the need for volunteers. Throughout the quarter, I pondered the factors that limited restoration on the Fountainview site. The SARE UW has everything they need to steward the site: mulch, plants, compost bins for English ivy. All we needed was volunteers. Using this thought, I realized that this is what we had to tell people. All we need is you. After developing my central message, I knew that I had to draw people's attention and use my art in a way to make my message more impactful. I wanted to create something that was interactable, something that people could put their hands on and really feel like they were a part of the art and a part of my restoration site. If volunteers were the missing puzzle piece, I needed to create the rest of the puzzle. Then, they would know how they fit into the site. Thus, my art piece is the rest of the puzzle. The Co-Motion Makerspace on UW campus facilitated the creation of my art pieces. First, I learned how to use the program Rhino. This is a 3D modeling software that I use to create the shapes and textures of my art pieces. Then, I learned how to use the laser cutter. The laser cutter is the hardware that would cut away at the wood and create my art pieces. Since these art pieces will likely remain on site until they decompose, I decided to use materials that were biodegradable and non-treated. Also, I used sheets of plywood from the waste cart to keep costs down and to reuse materials that would otherwise have been recycled. Eventually, these art pieces will function as downwoody debris, adding nutrients and a food source for organisms on site. This was a very new and exciting venture, and it was incredible watching the pieces that I had worked so hard on come to life. Finally, my art pieces were finished and ready for installation. Whenever I talk about the restoration site and mention that I'm installing art on campus, people brighten up and listen more closely. As far as the physical project goes, and the non-physical volunteer engagement aspect, I am proud to consider this site a success. After working on this site for the past few weeks, I expected to feel attached to this site. But now that I have really made the site my own in this unique way, it feels so much more personal. I have a much stronger attachment to this site than my other sites, and this is something that I want to consider in the future. When people are involved in art projects, they become emotionally invested in the outcome. Having learned this, now I understand why it is so important to involve volunteers not only in the restoration process, but to also get them engaged in creating art for the sites they volunteer on. This way, people are invested in coming back to the site and working on the sites that they created art for. I would highly recommend other restoration practitioners to integrate art projects into their restoration sites and to allow volunteers to shape the creative process with their guidance. When people walk past the site, I hope they see the art pieces and consider the message. Look at this site, I want to say. We have all the tools, plants, and materials. Put yourself into the scene, because all we need is you. Shout out to Haley Darby, the student manager of the Fountainview Site through the SERUW. Also, many thanks to Tom Erler, the grounds crew member who helps the SERUW take care of all of their restoration sites on campus. Thanks to Lance Warnicki for his help with the overview site footage and his incredible patience with technology. This project would not have been possible without the inspiration from my critical and imaginative restoration ecologies professor Rob Anderson and the rest of my classmates. Finally, kudos to the Society for Ecological Restoration and the University of Washington for their continued support of my restoration education. If you ever get the chance to visit UW campus, I hope you come visit the SERUW on the Fountainview site.